So, Nick, my voice is a little bit shaky still today,
Yeah.
recovering from being a little under the weather, but we got to do a recap on Ilia Topuria.
Oh, yeah.
What a spectacular finish, standing in the pocket and absolutely starching one of the best ever, if not the best ever at featherweight in Alexander Volkanovski. And it looked like from the minute the fight started that he wasn't there to go shot for shot with Volkanovski. And in a lot of ways, Volk was landing more clean shots in certain exchanges, but Ilia was willing to take two to give the mother load of the power to Volk. And that's exactly what happened in the second round. This guy's an extraordinarily complete mixed martial artist, and I think he's going to be very difficult to beat.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And Ilia Topuria is with that small group of unranked new prospects that are really shocking the world. And they're coming in hot. They're getting their hand raised every time they go out there, and they're doing it emphatically. Look, Alexander Volkanovski did everything right there. And this is the kind of fight where when you come back and do a recap, sometimes you got to go storyline, sometimes you got to go X's and O's. I'm going all X's and O's at first, and then we'll get into the storyline because I think that's actually pretty rich as well. Volkanovski was doing everything right, and on paper, he was probably winning that fight. I had him winning the first round, though it was close, and I had him probably getting the better portions of the second round until, of course, he wasn't. Man, a couple of things stuck out to me, though. Volkanovski was moving backwards, and every time he would move backwards, he would get really tall, and his chin would get high. And everybody in MMA does that. You can't avoid it. It's just something natural that happens when you retreat. But it seemed to me like Volkanovski was doing it a little bit more exaggerated than we've seen him do it in the past, and Topuria noticed it. And while Volkanovski was willing to engage, he was really trying to stay on the outside and use leg kicks and body kicks and use a lot of kicks and feints to keep himself away, to keep himself at bay, and to keep out of the boxing range for Ilia. Because everybody knows Ilia is a lights-out striker. He loves to get people roped into standing and trading with him. And it seemed to me like as long as Volkanovski could move around the outside, he'd be able to dance and at least, get through the fight all 5 rounds. And I think his chances would have gone up tremendously if he would have gotten to the 5th round. But Topuria showed us that not only can he throw on the inside, but he can actually trade on the outside. He was throwing strikes and landing them on Volkanovski while Volkanovski was kicking at him.
Yeah.
So when you have somebody that is able to throw hands as clean and precise as Ilia, you've got a really hard puzzle to solve. And while I think Volkanovski had a good game plan going in, look, stay on the outside, try to kick him, try to slow those legs down, try to get him less explosive, I think he was just a little bit too timid, a little bit too cautious. And oftentimes when you go trying to avoid something at all costs, that's what you wind up getting hit with. That's exactly what happened to Volkanovski. I think he felt the power a couple of times, and he realized all the rumors about Topuria's power were very real. And that's why I think he was trying to avoid it at all costs. But like I said, if you try to avoid it, that's likely what's going to catch you.
Yeah, well, you talk about these fighters that come into the UFC undefeated and then obviously unranked in the UFC when they enter, which is exactly what happened with Ilia Topuria. And then he went on a 6-fight tear all the way, and now he'll be God knows where on the pound-for-pound list, definitely in the top 5. So the meteoric rise since he's come into the UFC is something unlike what we've seen in recent time.
And well-deserved.
And John Anik said something that really stuck out to me after the fight last night. Ilia Topuria proved that this generation of MMA fighters are the greatest fighters of all time.
Yeah.
And trying to unpack what he means by that. That doesn't mean that Ilia Topuria is the GOAT of MMA. Obviously, he's got a long way to go before he's even in that conversation.
Right.
But it means that the skill set that these young guys, these up-and-comers, the guys that didn't have a number next to their name 18 months ago, 24 months ago, are the best versions of MMA fighters that we've seen.
Yeah.
Ilia Topuria, Umar Nurmagomedov, Ian Gary, Hamzat Chimaev, Shavkat Rakhmonov. These guys are the next gen of what's to come.
100%.
And if Ilia Topuria is any insight as to how exciting that's going to be, I'm excited to be an MMA fan now, even more than ever. And a lot of people are talking too about how Volkanovski he would have been able to eat that shot had it not been for the quick turnaround from the Islam Makhachev knockout.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this, that overhand that put Volkanovski out would have put out anybody at 145, notwithstanding whether or not they were head kick knocked out 3 months prior. That was a clean on the button overhand, followed up by almost like a shovel hook up the middle.
And that one landed as well.
Beautiful finishing sequence for Ilia. And you mentioned too, Ilia landing strikes while Volkanovski's kicking him. And to add an element that makes that even more impressive, Ilia's got about a 2.5-inch reach disadvantage on Volkanovski.
Wow.
Even though Volkanovski was shorter than Ilia, I think Volkanovski's reach is something like 71 and Ilia's is like 68.5, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So the fact that he can stand in there and bite down on his mouthpiece and is so comfortable with his head movement, his defense, his eyes to land those power shots when Volk is still within kicking range is something that is really tremendous.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Ilia Topuria would have knocked down half the roster at 155 with that shot. And you have to understand when he's going in there and he's fighting these guys, especially these high-level guys, because this was the first mega test for him. You're talking about one of the greats. He was so efficient, and he was choosing quality over quantity to the highest level. We've never seen somebody really pick their shots like that at featherweight. I think everybody at featherweight, and he's in great company as far as the champions go. There's not that many of them, and they're all...
Only the fifth one now.
That's right. And I think Topuria showed us that, like, look, I'm not going out here to try to win every minute. I'm not trying to go out here and win every round. I think he kind of went in with that Mike Tyson approach of, I'm going to go in and I'm going to finish him or I'm going to lose a decision. I don't think he was focused on just outpointing Volkanovski. No. I think he did want to do it emphatically. I think he wanted to get him out of there and do something that that nobody's ever done to Volkanovski at featherweight, and we've only seen it done to him one time, and he did just that. Man, he looked so good. And when you've got somebody stalking you and hunting you and walking you down and you're landing your shots, right? Volkanovski was doing what they intended the game plan to be. Kick the leg, slow him down, make him less explosive, get those calf kicks, get the body kicks going, because there's a lot of open stance situations because Volkanovski...
Work the clinch.
Yeah, Volkanovski... Oh, and by the way, I don't want to, only give Topuria the props because Volkanovski looked really good. Yeah. Every time they were clinching together, he'd find a knee, and it almost looked like it was effortless to land those knees for him. Like, he's so... versed in the clinch. He's so versed in every realm of MMA, and that just brings Ilia Topuria's win over him even more impressive. It's something that I really didn't see happening. I thought Ilia Topuria was about to meet his maker. I thought Volkanovski, being one of the best fighters in the world for a meaningful period of time now, was going to show him that there's another level, even on top of the top 3 of the UFC. Yeah. Once you get into that top 5 of the pound-for-pound list, you're talking about a whole nother level, and they kind of just operate at a different frequency. I still believe that the top 5 of the pound-for-pound list operates at a different frequency. I just think Ilia Topuria belongs in that discussion. He's so good with his strikes. You've got these snipers these days. Sugar Sean O'Malley is an absolute sniper. He's a murderer when it comes to just landing vicious power shots. And he might be a lanky guy that doesn't look like he's all muscle-bound, and he might have the clown look or something that people would
He can deliver the power, though.
He delivers the power. At 135 pounds, he's putting everybody down. And I think Topuria is just as heavy-handed, or if not more, for 145, and I can't wait to see how he does. I feel like they should give Volkanovski the rematch, because if you see somebody go out there and they get finished like that, a lot of people will say, even though this is not the case, that he got caught. I don't think Volkanovski got caught. I think he got beat, and I think that if he goes in there again, he's got a better chance to win. He understands the power now, but he knows what he did wrong. But if they don't give it to Volkanovski, if he wants to take his oars out of the water for a little bit, I'm really intrigued, because Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway is very exciting.
Super.
Ilia Topuria versus half of the guys in the top 5, top 10.
Movsar. I mean, there's some killers right now.
Yeah, this is such a great division, and it kind of needed that fresh coat of paint. And I didn't want to see Volkanovski, get beat like that, but it almost was better for the division to have a little bit of parity, a little bit of some fresh blood in there.
Yeah, and Volkanovski said Ilia's been talking about Spain. He wants to fight in Spain. Let me go over to Spain and try to reclaim my belt.
Right.
And off of merit alone, I mean, number one, Volkanovski has been the GOAT at featherweight for some time now, for a couple of years. Right. If you don't have him as your GOAT, you have to have him as your number 2 to Jose Aldo. But for me, Volk is the GOAT at featherweight. And so obviously, when you have somebody that's been that good and that consistent for that long, just off of merit, they deserve the rematch.
Right.
And then on top of that, he's a game fighter. He said yes to Islam Makhachev the first time he got in there and gave him all he could handle. He said yes again on 12 days' notice. He also defended his belt against Yair Rodriguez in emphatic fashion in the interim. 2023 was a very busy year for Volkanovski.
And had he got his hand raised against Islam Makhachev, I'm quite confident that for UFC 300, they would have offered him Leon Edwards, and he would have said yes to that too. So
You're not kidding.
he's
So
game.
Volk is game, and he definitely on merit deserves the rematch. However, I think we may have seen the changing of the guard. I'm not sure that a rematch would go any different. And I want to make one more point because I think this is an important one to make, because on social media today, I'm seeing the story written that we are now watching the decline of Volkanovski. Volkanovski's old. We hear a lot about the 35 curse, which is a very real thing for weight classes 170 and below. However, Volkanovski, for the time he was in there last night, looked very good.
Yeah.
He looked as good as you can possibly look against Yair Rodriguez over the summer. Volkanovski, and this is why I want to make this point, because last night all the credit needs to go to Ilia Topuria and how good this young man actually is.
Right.
Not that he beat a has-been that is past his prime. Volkanovski showed us like 6-7 months ago against Yair Rodriguez that his skills are unmatched at 145 until Ilia Topuria proved otherwise.
Yeah, Ilia is as advertised. He's one of the best fighters on the planet. He proved that to us last night. I had a feeling he was going to be one of those guys that, is an undeniable force. He's going to become a world champion. I just didn't think it was going to be that soon. After watching him last night, I think he's got the skills to beat everybody at 145. I know he seeks some greatness in his life. He wants to put on an amazing historical career with a ton of legacy behind it. And that's why I think we'll see him jump into 55, and he wants to get Conor McGregor out of retirement or wherever his fight is. The status of Conor McGregor is still up in the air, but I think Topuria's got a very bright future, and I do think we talked about the X's and O's a lot already. The storyline, though, is very cool. And Volkanovski even came out during fight week and a couple weeks before and was like, this is what I needed. I needed the story, because most of the time Volkanovski was going in there and dismantling people. And it's like, all right, there's nothing left. Like, he came, chewed him up, spit him out, and left him on the curb. Now, Ilia Topuria was this young, brash, hungry lion that had never been to the top of the mountain before. And Volkanovski goes, you know what? I'll give you your shot, young man. He gives him the shot. That was a perfect super villain for Volkanovski's superhero story, and the only way you can make this thing, make sense and really put an end to the chapter and into the era is to make a sequel. You've got to let Volkanovski get a rematch. It doesn't have to be next, but he does need to get a rematch with Ilia Topuria. I think the numbers would do well. I think that Ilia Topuria versus Volkanovski 2 would be different than the first one, but I'm kind of leaning with you. I don't know if the results would be different.
Yeah, and we'll break this down in a later video, but you did mention one other name as far as lights out striking is concerned, and that's Sugar Sean O'Malley. Don't think for one second that if he gets past Cheeto Vera, they will try to keep him away from Marab and move him right into a 145 super fight with Ilia Topuria. And while Ilia, I think, would be heavily favored in that fight, and for good reason, that would be a striker's delight.
I'm going to give you my hot take. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments if you've been sticking around for this long. But listen here. If Sugar Sean and Ilia Topuria fight 6 months from now, my money's on Sugar Sean O'Malley. I know that sounds crazy. I know he probably isn't as durable as the guys at 45 that Topuria has been able to get out of there. Sugar Sean O'Malley is the most talented, most skillful striker on the UFC's roster right now, and that includes those monsters at 185 and 205, Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. Sugar Sean is an innovator. He is showing guys things that we've never seen before, and everybody that's a high-level striker in MMA, and even if you're mid-level in the UFC, you are stealing things from Sugar Sean every time he goes out there and fights. Sugar Sean's the #1 striker in the world right now, and I think if he goes in there with Ilia Topuria, his body type is way different than Volkanovski's. He's very hard to get a hold of. He's very hard to pin down on the feet or on the ground. I think Ilia Topuria would be a bit stuck in the mud. I think Sugar Sean O'Malley likes his chances. Be on the lookout for that.
I think that's a great place to end it. Guys, don't be too harsh on Nick in the comments. We'll see you in the next one.
Bring it.